Hey, it's Tim Ash here. I am an expert on evolutionary psychology and applied that to business, to personal relationships, and to your life in general. So if you want to understand the operating system for human beings, you should figure out how we got here.
Excellent. Tim, thank you so much. I just want to quickly thank my two sponsors, Orange Kiwi Consulting and Crisp Imaging. I love doing this podcast for so many reasons, and there's typically four reasons why that come to mind for me as to why I love to do this so much. Number one, I get to talk to great people. I've done 150 or so episodes. I've had conversations with, hundreds now, dozens and dozens anyway, of people who are incredibly intriguing, many of whom I'd never met until we hit record, like today with Tim. Another reason is I love doing the research. I love learning about people. One of my favorite things about people is their backstories, why people do what they do. And that's the premise behind the From the Hart podcast is why do people do what they do? The third thing I love the most about it is that I get to go back and I get to not only have these conversations in real time, but I go back myself and do the editing because I don't hire an outside team, mostly because I love what I learn when I'm editing. I love going back and listening to the conversation, moving things around a little bit, and really oftentimes I'll go, dang it, I wish I would have asked this, or man, I wish I wouldn't have asked that, or wish I could have asked that differently. With editing, I kind of get to do that a little bit. And the fourth thing, I love the response. I love when I'm at an event or I get a call or an email from somebody who heard one of my guests and says, man, I listened to that guy the other day and it really inspired me. So I love the impact that we get to have by doing this. So Tim, I know that you have made a tremendous impact on your readers, on your audiences. Just a little brief about Tim. We'll weave a lot of this through the conversation. He's a highly rated keynote speaker. He speaks all over the world. He's spoken at the time that this was typed over 200 events across 4 continents. It's probably 300 at this point, but all over the world as a speaker. He's spoken to, gosh, I don't want to miss any of these companies like Google, Expedia, eHarmony, Facebook, American Express, Canon, Nestle, Symantec, Intuit, Humana, Siemens, Cisco, just to name a few. And there's dozens and dozens more on his website, timash.com. But Tim, I guess I'm just going to get started. First of all, welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy travel and speaking schedule and writing to spend some time with us today.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Ed.
Recently, I had a guest on that Tim has also guested on, Adam Hill. Adam and I know each other through the family business space. Adam's the one that introduced me to Tim.
I was actually born in the Soviet Union. It wasn't Russia at the time. It was the larger version of the Russian Empire. I was born in Moscow, and my parents decided to emigrate when I was 8 years old. My little brother was 5. So we left kind of not knowing where we're going. And at the time, there were only 4 countries taking Soviet refugees. It was the US, Canada, Australia, and Israel. And so we were in Italy deciding where to go. And my dad calls up his great uncle who ended up in the US and was a business success here and goes, hey, Uncle Saul, we're thinking of going to Canada. And my great uncle said, no, come to America. I'll take care of everything. So that 5-minute collect call from Rome to was forward from Madison Avenue to down to Florida, where my great uncle was staying. That changed my life and my family's life and why I'm not a Canadian.
Eh? Yeah, I was going to say, you could have been a Canadian.
Well, and the difference between Americans and Canadians is nobody hates Canadians.
Right.
They're
exactly.
just so nice.
Yeah.
We ended up in New York and then Ann Arbor, Michigan, Cherry Hill, New Jersey, near Philadelphia is where I went to high school. And then I got a full ride scholarship here at University of California, San Diego. So fantastic engineering school.
Right.
Nude beach next door, 3,000 miles from my parents. I mean, it wasn't a tough choice, I'll be honest with you. I turned down MIT and University of Pennsylvania, and it's just been here in San Diego ever since.
Not a lot of people go to San Diego and say, nope, not for me. Yeah, that's a pretty great area down there. So what was it like coming over here? Did you speak any English at all at 8 years old?
No. My parents dropped us in public school, and within 3 months we were fluent. And just immersion. I mean, I think most kids, if you're younger than puberty, you basically have that brain plasticity and can learn foreign languages without an accent. So I still speak Russian, but my word supply is diminishing. And obviously culturally, I don't know much about what's going on beyond the regular news. I've been back 5 times over the ensuing decades. And it definitely changed a lot right now. Unfortunately, we're going through a real dark phase there again.
Yeah.
They're in an expansionist mood, and Vladimir Putin is trying to, subdue, one of the former parts of the empire. Sure. It's really sad.
And you and I are about the same age, as we talked about before we hit record today. in an era when Russia was sort of seen as the enemy, the Cold War. And, if you ask
Yeah.
somebody 50 years ago, who's your number one enemy in America, Russia would always be the number one answer.
Yeah.
So coming from there, not only, yeah, you learn the language quickly, as you just stated, but how did you face that? And how would you say that trial as an 8-year-old coming over here to America has shaped you and prepared you for what you're doing now?
Well, I don't know if it was more where I came from or just the immigrant experience in general. I don't know how to describe myself because if an immigrant comes to this country, that's first generation. So that would be my parents.
Yeah.
But they brought me to this country. So I'm not second generation. I wasn't born here.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like this one and a half
1.5. Yeah. We
generation.
call it
Yeah,
1.5. Yeah.
1.5. Yeah. And that leaves an imprint because you're kind of between two worlds. You never fit in. I'd say I'm culturally, in a way, my soul is Russian, which despite kind of outward public appearances and the coarseness of the life there in the public sphere, Russians are actually kind of softies. They're more romantic and schmaltzy and communal, and you can't just kind of be independent and survive on your own. My dad always said he joined the Communist Party because you could either step on people or help people, and that was his choice, was to help people.
Wow.
Of course, he was drummed out of it when we left and, publicly humiliated, all that fun stuff back in the 70s. But the point is, I think that I have that kind of some deep characteristics of the Russian soul. And then I'm also obviously very fluent in America. And
the best of both worlds.
Yeah, but fitting into neither. So I guess the answer to your question is the way it marked me is I've always been a little bit on the outside looking in and have a different perspective than most people that are just natives and swimming in these waters.
I love that answer though, because I love the whole community aspect of that. That's, as you know, I work in the family business space, and I think that one of the things, I mean, Abraham Maslow talked about the hierarchy of needs, and one is belonging. We all want that feeling of belonging. And it sounds like, to your point, sort of feeling like I don't belong in my culture where I was born, trying to fit in the new culture has been a transition for you, but you've made a living of teaching people and executives and organizations how to work in community, how to really, you're not teaching people how to work in a silo, you're teaching people how to work in a community.
Yeah,
How have those two cultures helped you in that coaching that you do?
Well, you realize that certain things aren't bedrock. Okay, the British drive on one side of the road, we drive on the other.
Right.
That's just the decision somebody made. So the more you travel, and I've also, in addition to having been born in the Soviet Union, I've traveled to over 20 countries and all over the US as a result of my public speaking and work. And what I've seen is that there's what people consider bedrock is really just cultural overlays. It's how we do things here. And everything, your thought patterns, your speech, your belief systems all come from that cultural stuff. And I prefer to focus on the universals underneath that. And so that's taken me into this evolutionary psychology and understanding that, because what we evolve for as a species over hundreds of thousands of years is much more fundamental to the commonalities we share than the little cultural overlays that divide us.
So you just mentioned a word there, two words, and I'll throw a third in because you talk a lot about evolutionary biology and psychology. For those of us like myself who aren't quite sure what that means, can you give us more of a definition, and then we'll dive a little bit into some of the advisory work and books you've written on those, in those areas?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my undergrad work at UC San Diego was a dual major in computer engineering and cognitive science. I've always been interested in the brain and how cognition works. I did PhD work, although I quit after 7 years in AI. Almost got my PhD is how I say it. All ABD, that's like an unofficial all but dissertation. That's
all
kind
but
of
dissertation.
a joke among almost PhD people like me. And so I've always been interested in cognition and the way the brain works. And I applied it to marketing. As you mentioned, for 25 years, I ran an agency that optimized websites, and we created 1.2 billion in documented value for clients. But a lot of that wasn't based on technology. It was based on this kind of fundamental understanding of human beings. So here I am in marketing. I want to have you influence you to make certain kind of decisions. Okay, well, what do I need to understand? How people make decisions. Okay, that takes us back to psychology.
Yeah.
Well, psychology at its root to me is evolutionary psychology. And what all that means is if you want to understand human behavior, you have to retrace the whole arc of evolution and see what we picked up along the way. There's some things we share with very primitive life forms, insects, like dopamine, for example, the motivation to go and chase goals. And there's some things at the end of our evolution that are distinctly and bizarrely human. So it's understanding that whole arc that gives you the perspective of how people really make decisions.
You talk in your book about the Unleash Your Primal Brain, demystifying how we think and why we act. One of the things that really jumped out at me, and I seems like I've had this type of conversation, not just on the podcast for several years, but in conversations in general. I did a workshop last week to a small group of nonprofit leaders talking about how important it is for these were fundraisers. So the first thing is, as you develop relationships or build rapport with people, figuring out what you have in common. You talk about how the 8 billion people on earth, you talk in the book about the commonalities that we 8 billion people have. Can you talk a little bit further about that? I mean, to me that's the core of relationships, is identity, because it's easy to figure out differences. We're in a society. Sorry, I'm going long-winded here, but I'm kind of just riffing as I'm
Oh,
thinking
go
through this
for it. Yeah, I
question.
love it.
You and I talked before we hit record too. We're in a news era right now when we're recording. We're 8 days removed from the Charlie Kirk assassination. And so and I believe he was assassinated because of these, extreme philosophies and beliefs that he had by somebody who has extremely different philosophies and beliefs, obviously. And we don't need to dive into the detail of that particular case, but at the core of it, the commonalities that those two had, if they sat down in a real conversation over a cup of coffee or something, number one, Charlie might still be here, but number two, they would hopefully identify some of those things they have in common. And with 8 billion people on this planet, to your point, how do we get to really, I have ideas in my own, but I'd love to hear your expertise on how do we really get to the root and the core of what we have in common?
Ooh, well, unfortunately, one of the things we have in common is the need to be tribal.
Yeah.
And I mean that literally. We evolved on the plains of East Africa and the Serengeti then spread out all over the world over the last 70, 80,000 years. But quarter of a million years, basically, we're evolving to be in a group of a few dozen people.
Hmm.
And there are 1,000 times fewer people in the world. So imagine that. And
Yeah.
so if you ran into other human tribes, well, hopefully you did a little outbreeding so genetically you wouldn't, die out.
Right.
So there's some exchanging of genes, but basically you didn't see other tribes very often. There's plenty of room, plenty of hunting and gathering to be done, huge areas, and not a lot of contact. So what that meant is anytime we encountered another tribe, we had to be really, really careful. Our problem wasn't lions or tigers or bears, oh my.
Yeah.
It
Right.
was
Yeah.
other humans because we're deadly. And so if you ran into another tribe, there's a good chance you're going to be either outbred, absorbed, killed, or converted. And that still goes on in the modern day. So the need for tribalism and tribal belonging is really deeply seated in humans. And in fact, it's more important for us to be a good team player than to be right. That's a really, really important observation. You go like, how can those people think that shit? It's not actually based in reality. Well,
Yeah.
it's because it's more important not to be the sand in the gears. It's more important just to parrot your tribe's cultural beliefs and fit in because you can't survive on your own. And so we're very tribal. So the question is, where do you draw the edge of that tribe? And there's definitely, various kinds of political things like a fascist playbook of how to divide people and how to polarize people. And that's almost a science at this point.
I'm hearing the words you're saying, but I'm also hearing that need to be right phase. I think we all have that tendency to need to be right. I was in the jungle of the Amazon in Ecuador 13 years ago, and they told us, the tour guide, if you will, told us that, this community hasn't really seen, other than what we bring in as tourists, they really haven't seen a cell phone. They don't know what a cell phone is. In many cases, they don't know what a white person looks like. So be prepared that they're going to look at you when you're on your phone taking pictures or you're walking around looking at whatever you're looking at. They're seeing something they've never seen before, or very rarely seen before. There are defense mechanisms. There are attacks. There are people respond and react differently in different situations. Talk about that core, why we react the way we react. I know you've done a lot of research and writing on that.
Yeah, well, so I guess you could say what makes us distinctly human is our ability to learn culture, and it was a life hack. In other words, other species, let's take squirrels as an example, they're also across a wide range of habitats. Some hibernate in the desert, others have little wings and can fly between tree branches or have rotating ankles so they can actually go down head first along tree trunks. Some weigh 6 kilograms, others are just a few grams. I mean, huge variety in their physical adaptation to their environment. Humans don't have that. I mean, the in Africa, the pygmies are about 1.5 meters tall. The Dutch are the tallest men in the world, on average about 1.83 meters. So without doing the conversion, the point is there's not that huge of a physical difference in human beings. We adapted by learning about our environment from our surrounding tribe. So we have these delayed brains that aren't fully mature till about 25. I'm raising a couple of teenagers, so I can vouch for that. And we learn by absorbing the knowledge of our tribe over multiple generations. So if you want an edge about how to survive in the desert, you're surrounded by people that did that for a long time. You want to survive in the Arctic, you can do that by watching your tribe there. And so that's built into us. And so we want to learn from people like us. That's the point. Again, historically, that's a few dozen people that look like us, that talk like us. And so that's, like I said, kind of built in because that's our survival edge to learn about the local environment.
Listened to a podcast on my drive yesterday with a gentleman who's a doctor and an astronaut. Intriguing conversation. Jonathan Fields on the Good Life Project, one of my initial podcast inspirations. He talked about when he was in space, walking in space and looking down at Earth. And the thing that hit him the most was seeing the entire, at least the side of Earth that he was seeing at that time. He eventually saw all of it because, they're traveling at 17,000 miles per hour, going around, orbiting the Earth in 90 minutes. And what hit him was just, it's all one planet. He goes, I could see the outline of North America and Europe and South America and Africa in one snapshot. And he goes, to me, it's like one Earth, one people.
Yeah.
As you get down here, it changes your perspective a little bit. So talk about seeing things in common.
So I'd say that there's been some sociological research that basically says where we attach to that tribe, it determines our outlook. So for example, more, let's call them liberal people are attached at larger levels. They care about, say, the US, but beyond the US, all of life on the planet. You find among liberals more animal rights people because they're living beings. So they attaching to a larger tribe, whereas more conservative people, that also has survival value. So they're in the gene pool as well. And it's more local. It's like, do you look like me? Do you pray like me? Do you live in my town? Or do you practice my religion? That's a much more local tribal attachment. And so that's one of the things, and that's why you find there's a kind of filtering going on in this country where people that have more progressive genes and beliefs filter themselves into large cities. And so that concentrates the localists even more in suburban or even rural areas.
Yeah, this astronaut, to your point, he said if an alien were to come down from another planet and say, he would look at us and say, you are Earth people, whether you look Black, Chinese, Latino, Caucasian, whatever, male, female, I see you as an Earth person, not as an American, a European, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's interesting. So that perspective of, and I've talked about that a lot too. If you grew up in the South, you might be Baptist. If you grew up in Italy, you might be Catholic. You grew up in Utah, you might be Mormon. I mean, chances are based again on kind of where you were raised, where you were.
Yeah, and so there's this tension, this massive tension between, again, the environment we grew up in, which was tribes of a few dozen people, to 8 billion people on the planet. And we're members of overlapping tribes. This is a kind of an important concept. So which one do you most strongly attach to? Is it being a nationalist? Is it being a Republican or a Democrat? Where's your strongest tribal affiliation? Under what conditions does it get activated? Because, I'm a member of the streamlined haircut tribe, or the father of teenagers tribe,
there you go.
or the driving a Lexus tribe, whatever. We have a lot of tribes, iPhone versus Samsung, that kind of stuff. So it depends on which tribal part is getting activated. Before, that used to be just one cohesive, unified notion of a tribe, and all your culture was carried in that tribe. Now it can be, we weren't designed for this, and it can be used to separate us. And if we don't figure this out, I used to be an optimist. I don't have such great feelings about what's coming down the road because we're not handling it well, and the velocity of change is increasing. And unless we figure out how to be more global and, like you say, universalist and understand our common humanity, we're in for some real rough sledding.
in the executive coaching that you do, and I do this with a lot of family businesses as well, one of the things that a great leader, I believe, this is Ed Hart's opinion, needs to be able to do is understand, work with, mentor, coach, listen to, advise people that come outside of those 12 different areas you talk about. I mean, if you're leading an organization of a couple thousand people, you have people from every tribe in that organization and you're their leader. What type of advising, consulting, wisdom do you share with these people who have to be able to relate outside of what it's easy to lead a company of 30 people who think like you, look like you, act like you, talk like you. Mm-hmm. Not easy, but easier.
And born in your small town, probably.
And born in your small town. Yeah, exactly. You know how they think because they think like you. What about those of us who are in a position where we have to lead just diversity and people from all over the world and languages and backgrounds and religions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I've actually developed a framework along these lines based on evolutionary psychology. Again, knowing we're tribal, knowing that we pick a leader to follow because of survival value, or that they're going to give us some benefit ultimately. That's why you pick a leader. So I've come up with a three-part framework, and I call it the initiated tribe. So basically, if you think about it, and when you're talking about this from an owner's perspective or a company executive's perspective, we want people that are both passionate and productive. And so if I drew that kind of as your usual two-axis graph,
yeah, exactly, right?
Up on passion, up on productivity, up and to the right.
Top right, you got the perfect person, right?
Yeah. And so low passion, low productivity, that would be your typical bureaucrat.
Right, exactly.
They don't care and they're not doing anything.
And they don't care.
And then you have the cheerleaders. They're very enthusiastic, high passion, but what are they contributing? I don't know, but they're sure excited about it.
Yeah.
And then there's
we're 0-13.
Yeah.
We're the best 0-13 there is.
Yep. And then there's the what I call the worker bees. Those are high productivity but low passion, which means they don't really have the vision. They're just grinding along and being quote unquote productive in a well understood function. What you really want is a combination and high passion, high productivity, and that's loyalists. So the real question, I think, for business leaders these days is how do you instill loyalty? And again, in my framework, that would be how do you get them to activate their work tribal allegiance more frequently and more completely under more circumstances? Because they're not going to change their religion. They're not going to change their race. They're not going to change their basic world outlook when they walk through your door. But you can probably bump your work allegiance above the whether they're an Apple person or a Samsung person, right? Or whether they're they like beer or wine. So the idea is to intentionally raise that attachment and how often that business tribe is activated. And to do that, you need a three-step framework, as I see it, again, based on evolutionary psychology and everything that I've researched and done for clients. The first starts with personal purpose of the leaders. And we've touched on that, and you were talking about from the heart and your whole approach. I mean, why would I follow you in particular?
Yeah.
And most leaders are talking about, I want to build a company, I want to build a legacy, and that's their purpose. And I go, wait a second. If your purpose, who you are on this planet in this lifetime, is to build a business, I feel really sorry for you if that's how limited it is. So if you don't have a clear sense of personal purpose, nothing happens. And unfortunately, most of us are busy scrumming and pivoting and driving, and we don't actually live with purpose. And again, purpose isn't just some soft skill or something. It's been shown, as you know, to be highly correlated with financial success, with wellness and lifespan and everything else. So kind of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, everyone of us needs to find our individual purpose. Until you get clear on that, most things won't really coalesce in your life anyway. So that's the first, personal purpose. Before I go on the other one, I just want to see if you have any thoughts or comments.
Yeah, my first thought on that, the question that's brewing in my head, and I don't want to take us away. I want to hear your other two for sure, and I know our audience does as well. On that purpose, do you think, let's just use the employee leader scenario. This could be congregation pastor, this could be political party candidate, whatever. Do people tend to gravitate more towards, and maybe the question is, and maybe the answer is in the question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you find that people tend to gravitate more towards a great leader or a great cause?
I think that the leader's purpose has to resonate with yours. So I think that that spans both and doesn't even answer your question. But
It does in a way, though.
again, you have to be drawn to it. So the way that most effective leadership stories are told, in my mind, is the hero's journey, and you're familiar with that story arc, right?
Right.
World was okay, things got bad. I was called to a quest. I picked up some allies along the way. I slayed the dragon. There was a regreening of the earth, and okay, so now here I am flying my banner, go on my crusade because I really care about this thing. And so it's a voluntary thing. Again, we picked our leaders in the tribe because we wanted to follow them. And so you should be irrelevant to most of the world. Your mission, your calling, your expression of that in your company or organization, it doesn't matter if other people like it. But the ones that do, they have to say, where have you been all my life? So if it has to really resonate for them, and then they join your crusade. And that's the basis for it. Unless you're clear about that, unless you're clear about your own test, what you stand for, and what you're trying to bring into this world, you're not going to be successful in attracting followers. So maybe that's a roundabout way of saying, maybe I think that the leader matters and what they stand for more than the cause.
Yeah, and cause feels more, philanthropic, which can be, and it isn't always. I had Dave Wharton, the founder of the Tugboat Institute, on a couple of weeks ago, and Dave talks about evergreen companies, and there's 7 pillars to these evergreen companies. We talked more about paced growth in that conversation, but the first one is purpose.
Yeah.
People need to know they're aligned with a purpose. That doesn't mean we're all thinking the same.
No. And by the way,
important to us all.
Purpose is not a goal. A purpose is not
Right.
retire by 50 with this much money in the bank. Okay. And
Right.
it's not build a company to hand off to my kids either. It's so I'll share mine if you like. I actually have a positive and a negative purpose that I developed through my work through the Mankind Project. So my positive purpose is kind of a North Star. Again, you can never reach it. Is I co-create a world of peace, safety, and love through joyous expression and service.
That's a great world I want to live in.
Yeah, so that's my vision. I know where I'm headed. Will I ever achieve it? Of course not. Okay, because there are a million ways to do that and to trip up doing it every day.
The joy is in the journey, like they say, right?
Yeah, but being in alignment with that, like I know where to devote my energy. If it's on purpose, like doing this interview with you, having been recommended by our mutual friend Adam, I knew this would be a quality thing, and this is my giving. I'm of service and joyous expression. Hopefully, you can see coming out as part of it. Definitely. So I'm a hell yes for this interview. And if it's anything else, I'm a hard no. There's no maybe. There's no meh. Yeah. I'll do it half-assed. I don't do. So purpose gives you that directional North Star.
Yeah, and that's great because I have a dear friend, and she listens to the show, and she's been on the show, and we do a lot of work together. Jenny Denon, she's one of twin sisters, Jenny and Katie, who run a family company here in Orange County, and both of them, but Jenny and I in particular, have talked a lot about, it's either when somebody asks you to do something or go somewhere or be part of something, it's either hell yeah or hell no. What is it that makes you say hell yeah? To your point, it's in alignment with my cause, my purpose. You stated your purpose.
Yes.
It's in alignment with that. Hell yeah, I'm in.
And it's important to have it in a very compact form. If I can state it in a sentence or two, like I did, that makes it actionable. It's a tool for making those value judgments. And if it's long or undefined, then it doesn't work. And by the way, I have a negative one as well, which I alluded to. And that's my unconscious. So from a Jungian kind of perspective, your shadow or what drives you, so I try to put my shadow in front of me and become aware when I'm acting out of those automatic old tapes. And so my unconscious negative purpose is I create a world of loneliness, disconnection, and pain by seeking distractions, acting like a victim, and indulging in self-righteous anger.
Wow.
So if I catch myself doing any of those things, it's like, oh, there you are, you little bastard. You're doing it again. And, and you catch yourself doing it. And so there's kind of like this vector. I'm heading in this direction and away from this thing. I want to be aware of my shadows, but my positive purpose is my kind of conscious guiding star.
That resonates so much with me. In this class I taught last week for these nonprofit leaders, one of the things I asked them was, I said, I want you to take a moment to list 5 things that this world just absolutely does not need anymore. And they came up with their lists like that. If I would have said, list 5 things the world needs, they'd have come up the list 5. They would have come up pretty quickly. If I asked them to list 50 things we don't need, they still could have generated that list pretty quickly. 50 things we need, they'd have been stuck at 10 for a while. Our human mind, and you know this better than I do, but from my experiences, it's so easy for us to think of the negative, the what if I fail? What if I fall? What if I don't succeed? What if she says no? What if it's too hot? What if it hurts me? What if I get sick? What if,
Right.
rather than, what if I fly? There's a poem, what if I fall? What if you fly, my child? And it's just like, oh my gosh, even those words just make me emotional, thinking about the positive and really what it triggers in our brain. We think negative, it triggers these negative thoughts. We think positive, it brings up this emotion. I mean, I'm an emotional guy. I cry at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, I think that's part of being a fully expressed human. It's not the domain of men or women.
Yeah, I don't like when say, oh, men are so much this way and women are so much that way. Because in my home, my wife is the handyman. She's emotional, but not as emotional as I am. She's more steady as a rock, and I'm more reactionary and emotional. My decisions are much more emotionally driven than most men. That's why I don't like it when they categorize things as most men do, most women do. All right, so you talked about purpose. I want to hear your other two.
Yeah, so the second step then is, okay, if you're talking about some kind of organization, and you can say, again, you mentioned pastors or, a rabbi or whatever, it could be a religious organization, it could be, let's talk about it in the business sense. You need a core culture. And again, you hear this platitudes about, yes, we have a strong culture in this kind of business. It's rarely true. So there are two characteristics that a culture has to have. One is it has to be complete, and the other is it has to be compact. Both are equally important, because if it's not complete, the vacuum is going to be filled in with random stuff, with weeds growing in your garden. And if it's not compact, you won't be able to transmit it easily. So let me give you a quick example. Again, from our polarized political times, I can define a belief system or commonalities around which people coalesce, tens of millions of people in this country, by naming four things. You ready?
Okay.
White, evangelical, individual rights, gun ownership.
Yeah. You got conservative Republicans.
Right. And do you see how compact that is? I just named four things and you're smiling already. It's like, duh, it's obvious, which is,
you said the first one, I knew where you were going. Yeah.
But which is obvious, but also why Republicans punch above their weight politically, because it is so obvious and so compact and so easy to transmit to others. Whereas it's the joke, I think it was Will Rogers once famously said, he goes, I'm not a member of any organized political party. I'm a Democrat, right?
Yeah.
So it's this big umbrella. Everyone's got their isms and their causes. And even though that's more people, but it's just fragmented and too unwieldy.
Yeah.
And so the compactness in terms of effectiveness is really important for a culture. So complete and compact. And again, that's a tension, refining that language, making it more compact. And by culture, I don't mean just like what the little logo behind your reception desk when you come into the office, or something.
Here's what we stand for. Yeah.
Yeah. Our values.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's really, it's your language, it's belief systems, it's technology. All of that is part of that core culture. And you have to intentionally define it. And those are the first two steps I've talked about, by the way, are the things that leaders can't outsource. You can't outsource your personal purpose, and you can't outsource your core culture.
Oh,
so those are the first two steps. You can buy everything else. You can buy strategy, operations, tactics. You can't buy personal purpose or core culture.
No, and I made that mistake. I'm 40 years old. 21 years ago, I just stepped into a general manager role for a minor league baseball team, and I just come out of all these MBA classes and and I learned all these things in a classroom that I should be doing as a leader. And I came in late one night after everybody was gone, and I sat down and I wrote my mission statement and the value statement and the vision statement, took it to Kinko's and made photocopies, laminated it, stuck it all over the walls, put a copy on everyone's desk. And when they came in the next morning, it's like the mission statement in Jerry Maguire. It's just a mission statement. People laughed. Like, sure, MBA kid, whatever,
Yeah.
And no one bought into it. No one participated in it. I knew what I wanted to create, but this was just me, the guy in the corner office. Once we scrapped it and literally shredded it, and that's okay, we still need to do this, but we need to do this together over the course of weeks rather than just an all-nighter with one guy. We came up with what I thought was a very powerful vision of who we were as a team, what we were about, what we stood for, what we were trying to create. And every decision that was made for the next 3 years with that team, when I was in the leadership role, was driven by those values, vision, and that mission.
And
we didn't do it.
And you can't just not only outsource that to others, you have to be, like you say, an active creator in
To
it.
engage
But
people.
also, you have to be the one that it's like politicians stay on message, stay on message, stay on message, tell whatever little stories, vignettes, and things to keep that culture alive. By the time you're sick of saying it two, three
Mhm.
hundred times,
Yeah.
maybe it'll start to sink
Start to
into
sink in
someone's
there. Yeah.
consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I've said this a million times and they may be hearing it or feeling it for the first
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
Yeah. No, that's so important. And going back to not every white evangelical Christian gun-toting person is Republican, and not every Republican is white evangelical gun-toting. I don't own a gun. I am a conservative, but I don't own a gun. I am white. I am Christian. I don't espouse a lot of the same beliefs as my party does. I actually lean the other direction in a lot of my beliefs. I always joke I'm sort of blessed and sort of cursed that I can see up the middle on most things. I understand
Mhm.
why people love Trump. I understand why people can't stand Trump. And why people loved Obama, couldn't stand Obama. I
Yeah,
maybe
and
that's
look, we
I
all
don't
come to it from our own individual life journeys and
right.
traumas and, intergenerational stuff.
Yeah.
And so as again, just reflecting on my own journey as an immigrant, I came here, I was like, screw those Soviets and the mean
Right.
Russians, so hard on foreign policy, libertarian on economics, don't reach in my pockets, liberal probably on social issues. I was this weird mismatch, but that
Yeah.
came as a result of who I was and
Right.
how I was brought up, And so I think, we're, like I said, we're all deeply embedded in whatever culture we grew up in, and it's very hard to disentangle that.
Yeah. All right. Take us to the third step.
So the third part of the initiated tribe framework is intentional initiations. You can't just say it's like, here, Ed, welcome to my company. Here's your branded coffee mug and T-shirt, and here's your desk, and
Yeah.
here's
I'm
your
holding up my
laptop.
From the Hart Podcast
Yeah,
mug.
yeah,
Oh my
exactly.
goodness.
It's
Yeah.
like,
There you go.
don't
Yeah.
don't you feel like you're part of the tribe
Right.
now?
There you
The
should be.
answer is
You got the T-shirt. Come on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the answer is hell no. So, but what if I gave you the mechanics of bonding any group?
Yeah.
And if we go back again to the plains of the Serengeti, you'll see why this works so well. Let's say you're in a hunting party and your life depends on the people around you, which it pretty much does. It's
Yeah.
that level of bonding that we're talking about it. So let me give you the four ingredients. So the first is modeling by the leaders. And again, you can see why we need that strong personal purpose and having developed that core culture.
Yeah.
You have something I want, which is why I choose you to go on that hunting party with and to lead us. You have something I want. That's my motivation for wanting to be in your tribe. The second is peer pressure. Now, often that's seen as a negative, and again, but we don't have time to have a committee meeting when the lion's charging at us. You need to. Everybody's got to be on
Something
board.
has to be
Everyone's
made.
got to be normed. Yeah, it's a survival thing. So,
Yeah.
so peer pressure. If you're not sure how to act in this tribe, look at the people already in it.
Could you replace the word pressure maybe with accountability to make it a little more?
I'm sorry, but that's a little soft business
Okay.
speak to me. So no, I mean pressure. Like you
Okay.
have to conform.
Got it.
So again, it doesn't matter if you're right or
Yeah.
wrong. There's used to be was the old joke. There's three ways to do things. There's the right way, the wrong way, and the army way.
I was gonna say, or my way. Yeah, the
Yeah,
army.
because in the army they always do things their own way. It's not right or wrong. It's just the way they do it.
That's
Okay,
their
so
way. Yeah.
so it's kind of like that. So it's just
Okay.
get on the bus.
Yeah, you're in or you're out, but you got to decide now.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the peer pressure. And the going along with that is synchronized group activities. We have to do things together at the same time in the same way, and that resonance, like they've shown that people do the wave at a stadium or
Mhm.
yoga or tai chi classes if you're more of a California snowflake
Yeah.
like me.
Well,
You don't even have to like the people you're doing it with, but if you're doing synchronized group activities with people, singing along in a church choir, whatever it is, you feel part of a greater whole and you feel better.
Yeah.
And then the final element is the proof is in the pudding. The only way we're going to see if this is an effective tribe is it's actually useful for something. So the fourth element is overcoming meaningful challenges together. So again, if I hand you that branded coffee mug, it doesn't mean anything. But if we bled and died next to each other, this like warfare would be kind of the most
Right.
extreme version of this. They say that you fight for the buddy next to you.
Mhm.
It's not some abstract cause. So
Yeah.
overcoming challenges together has to be part of it. It can't be handed to you, which is why frat hazings will never go away, which is why gang jump-ins will never go away, because there's got to be a test and a challenge in order to join the tribe in the first place. at least however crudely, that's the purpose it serves. So again, 4 elements of an intentional initiation have to be designed into it because our environment isn't creating that pressure anymore. Modeling by the leaders, peer pressure, synchronized group activities, and overcoming meaningful challenges together. So I'm going to actually ask you, if you will, let's just try this. So I invite you to close your eyes.
Okay, cool. I love it.
Everyone listening too.
I'm now the guest on the podcast. I love this.
And everyone listening as well. And think of what is the most connected you've ever felt in a social group outside of your birth family or immediate family, okay, a chosen tribe, if you will. Mm-hmm. Now, when you were entering or becoming a member of that tribe, were these things operating? Modeling by the leaders. You wanted their example and to be more like them or embody some of their qualities. Peer pressure. You quickly figured out the behavior norms and rules in that environment and went along with them. Synchronized group activities. You did things together in the same way at the same time. And finally, overcoming meaningful challenges together. Okay, now I invite you to open your eyes. You're already smiling. So
well, let me tell you the irony of this one for me.
Sure.
I'm 18 years old. I'm a senior in high school, Fullerton High School, Orange County, California.
Right on. We used to fence against Cal State Fullerton. Yeah.
There you go. My baseball team that I'm on is the Fullerton Indians. Our uniform said tribe across the front. We were the tribe. If you played for the Indian, not the football team, not the basketball team. If you played for the Fullerton Indians baseball team, now I know the Indians isn't politically correct, and that's another conversation for another podcast, not mine. Tribe was if you were on the tribe, you knew that was the boys baseball team in Fullerton High School. We would have walked and ran through a wall for our coach.
Right on.
And he was
the embodied qualities you wanted.
Yeah. Gene Martin passed away a couple of years ago. Coach Martin and I stayed close up until, I got the call from his wife that he had died. That's how close we were up until the end of his life.
Yeah. Sounds like he made an impact.
He made a massive impact, and I could do a whole hour or 2 or 3 on him. I think there were 15 or 16 of us on the team. 10 or 11 of us are on a group text today, 43 years later. That tribe was connected. We had a great leader that we would have ran through a wall. We connected. We went through the common things. We were a baseball team. We were good. We were a fantastic team, highly successful, 26-4. I can tell you, I can't tell you the score of the 26 wins, but I can tell you the score of the 4 losses. I can tell you the practice we had the day after those 4 losses, but I can't tell you the practices we had after the 26 wins.
So overcoming challenges.
Yeah, overcoming challenges together bonded us. We had that common thing. Putting on that tribe uniform at the beginning of the season was pretty cool. Putting on that tribe uniform during the season was even better. Putting on that tribe uniform at the end was phenomenal.
After you'd earned it.
When I got the cup at the end of the season, this cup would be gold to me. The cup on day one was like, it's a cup, says Fullerton Tribe.
Exactly. It doesn't mean this. When I said this, another friend of mine, fellow keynote speaker, he is a retired lieutenant commander in the Navy, headed West Coast operations for training Navy SEALs. About 1,500 people reported to him, Jimmy May. And when I said to him, what do you think of this framework and these 4 elements of intentional initiation? He goes, you just described Bud's training, the SEAL intake, where that about 80% of people wash out from, even though they're elite soldiers already. So to him, I was like, it was a big, but the point is that the mechanics of this is the same. I don't care if you're starting a book club, a new religious cult, a high performance organization, a military unit, it's all the same. It's the mechanics of how we bond, which is why, again, it's important to start with that personal purpose of the leaders and the core culture, because what you're binding people around is the core culture. Unless you're really clear about it, having these mechanics won't help you. So you see how all these 3 things kind of feed into each other. And so to me, this is how you produce loyalists in your company. This is the only way to do it. It's a time-tested way that we evolved for. And so I know there's all kinds of fads, servant leadership this, or, resilient leadership that. I'm sure whatever the buzzword is these days, but I'd rather not go into those fads. I'd rather focus on those fundamentals of evolutionary psychology and use that as the basis for building a company.
Servant leadership, Hugh, we talked about Ken Blanchard, and that's a massive, but I think that Ken would agree with those other 3. Organizations need the great leader, but they I think of all of that, the thing that really stands out for me, and I'm glad I asked the question about accountability and the answer you gave, because as you said the answer, I thought, yeah, no, it really is peer pressure. You are a part of this or you're not. Yeah, we are accountable to each other. Yeah, that's great.
Well, Jim Collins, get on the bus, get off the bus. That's
Yeah,
chapter
let's get the
one.
right people on the bus and then figure out which seat they're going to be in later. But let's get on Pete Carroll, the former coach of USC, then the Seahawks, now the Raiders. I was at USC.
What's his name? The guy, Southwest Airlines. Same thing.
Herb Kelleher.
Yeah, Herb's like get the right people in with the right attitude. You can't change or attitude. You can't fix attitude.
Yeah, Pete Carroll recruited the best 60 athletes. You know, a guy that played wide receiver in high school might have been the defensive back in college, or the guy that played quarterback in high school might be the safety in college. Get the right athletes in, train them in the right positions, and go win.
Speaking of which, the athletes and military people in my mind, like when I used to run my digital marketing agency, got promoted to the front of the line when I was hiring, because either one of those, if you're a 24-year-old Army captain, you commanded a company, their lives depended on you. That's a lot of responsibility. Or if you're a collegiate athlete at any sport, you know how to self-discipline, how to balance work, other priorities, not partying all the time. So all of that stuff. So that kind of was it. I think it's a sports coach that said this, that adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it.
Reveals it.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I do too. I like that a lot. I use that in various aspects of my life. We're up against an hour, and I don't want to, I want to go 2 more hours with you. I just
I'm happy to come back if you're serious.
Yeah. I'm 100% serious. I think this should be part 1 in a series, and I think a lot of people listening today would want that as well. A couple more questions for you. I love a term that is on your website about your book, Unleash Your Primal Brain, Demystifying How We Think and Why We Act. I'm going to ask you a question that you pose in the book, and that is, what makes you tick?
Well, I think
you sort of talked about that
personal purpose, a bit. I'd say right now, though, my watchwords, what I look for and what I'm going more deeply in, are 3 ideas. One is presence. So really be present, not in my head, not in the future, not in the past, but I mean, pretty much every spiritual tradition in the world has that at its core. Be here now.
Wherever you are, be there.
Yeah. The second is gratitude. Again, I think the only renewable resource in the universe that you can never have to excess and never run out of. This is like looking around and saying, God, it's a miracle that I'm here right now, and look at all the things I have. And I think that mindset is really, really powerful. And then finally, surrender to the universe. Now, this is the one I'm still a big work in progress on, because if you have a good brain, if you have a lot of willpower, if you have a lot of energy, you drive through life. And I think a lot of business leaders definitely fall into this category, and entrepreneurs. But it's realizing, at least again, like you say, we're at the same life stage. I just graduated to the 6th floor to join you. But you realize that you're not the star of the movie. You're not driving the boat. It doesn't matter.
The movie's not even about you.
Yeah, and other people aren't extras in your movie. They have their own lives, and that they think they're the star. So that things are as they are, and that's exactly how they should be, almost like a Taoist notion of reality. So that surrender to the universe, it's the hardest one. I keep fighting against it, but in a way, what you do matters, and in a way, it doesn't matter 1 iota.
100 years from now, maybe people will read about some of us in a book, and maybe our families will talk about their great-great-grandma or grandpa who did this. But yeah, make an impact where you are now.
Yeah, and then that stuff fades pretty quickly. I mean, I remember reading about there's this African tribe, I forget which one, but their notion of a life is a person truly dies when there's no more living memory of them.
Yeah, I love that. I talk about my dad who passed away 4 or 5 years ago. And
so he's still alive.
He will be, because I'm teaching my grandkids who are 6. They remember, they see pictures of them with grandpa when they were 1 or 2 years old, and maybe a couple of memories. A 6-year-old remembers age 2 better than a 60-year-old remembers age 2. The further we get away from it, the less we remember. But you're right. Yeah, we live as long as our memory lives. I love that. I'm paraphrasing you, but that's...
Well, I'm paraphrasing somebody else, so steal from the best.
I asked this next question as we get close to wrapping up here today. I always ask people, how can people reach you? And I'll put, timash.com, and I'll put your LinkedIn profile and any other way you want. But I'm going to ask a different question. Why do people reach out to you?
Well, there's, I'd say I have three front doors. The first is the business, which is if you want a public speaker, if you want a workshop leader on a variety of subjects from corporate culture to online marketing, which is written other books and ran conferences about that. That's all at timash.com. And you mentioned one of my books, Unleash Your Primal Brain. That one's at primalbrain.com. And that's basically the operating system for all human beings. Again, what the 8 billion of us share. And you can use that for business, which I have for marketing very, very effectively. You can use that for interpersonal relationships. You can use that for personal growth. It kind of peels back the cultural layers and explains how we got to be this really weird creature that took over the whole planet. And then my latest book, which we haven't touched on, is called Primal Dating. I wrote this with the brilliant Dr. Limor Gottlieb, and it just came out, and it's available in paperback as well as ebook. And despite the name, it's not about dating. It's basically kind of like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. It helps explain the massive gender asymmetries between men and women and how we enter into relationships, bonding, non-monogamy, jealousy, all of that stuff, how we attract and select. And then it talks about how the modern world distorted all that and has practical guides in terms of insights and tactics for men and women to deal with each other better. And the deeper I go down that rabbit hole, the more I realize how messed up relationship formation is across the whole world. This is a civilization level thing that's going on right now. And we're just trying to offer this, again, foundational understanding of it without all the cultural overlays, without the value judgments. There are massive asymmetries. Anyone who says different is crazy. And it's just understanding what they are and having more empathy and compassion. So no one's going to win the gender wars. It's the species dies if that happens.
Right. Yeah. I guess. Yeah.
So I don't care about the kind of feminist shock troopers. They're going to get mad. I don't care about the red pill goblins of the manosphere that, are trying to get laid or whatever they're doing. I care about understanding men and women, and some of the deepest parts of our core happen inside of relationships. And this book is, like I said, not about dating. It's for married people or people in long-term relationships as well.
I really just back away from these podcast conversations going, man, I'm so blessed that I always feel blessed that I get to interview the people I get to interview. But, every now and then a guest will just hit me to the core like you did today. Having me close my eyes, think about that, literally my tribe. It was the Fullerton Tribe baseball team. But things prior to that and since, and the things I'll be thinking about as a result of this conversation. I can't wait to have you back and dive into Primal Brain and dive into the other books you've written and the things that you're doing. If you'll have me, I'll definitely have you, is what I'm saying.
Ed, it's been a joy and a pleasure. And like I said, I feel on my positive purpose. I'm happy to be back. Yeah, just say the word.
Well, trust me, the minute we log off, I'm going to be sending you a calendar invite. So, if you've listened or watched this conversation on any of our platforms, the best is yet to come. I think this conversation was great. I've learned a lot. I know there's a lot about leadership that I'm going to apply. I do a lot of consulting for companies as well. And a lot of the things that we've talked about today are going to be implemented right away into what I'm doing. So I appreciate the education that I've received in this last hour.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people are interested in my executive advisory, then they want to actually put this into practice, because one thing to say, personal purpose, core culture, intentional initiation, but how does that apply to my world? That's where the rubber meets the road. And so I help companies with that and to grow their business. Basically unlimited on-call access to me for a senior executive in a mid-sized company. So if you want to learn about that, that's on timash.com or connect with me on LinkedIn.
Sounds good. I'll put all that information in the notes on this. And when we publish this and when we put it out on social media, we'll have all your contact information there as well. So I always finish with one last question, which is redundant to the last hour, but I'm going to ask it because it's sort of the brand of the From the Hart podcast. And I've asked it of all of my guests. Tim Ash, what's in your heart?
Letting go of whatever defensiveness I've had earlier in my life and opening up to other human beings.